Grappling with losing his wife, Tom Ludlow has turned to alcoholism for solace. Working on an undercover operation of the LAPD one evening, Tom meets two Korean gangsters for a supposed firearms deal. Having placed the machine gun in his car's truck in such a way that it remains stuck, he instigates the gangsters on purpose and even lets them beat him up. When the gangsters leave with his car, a tracker he placed in it leads him straight to their hideout, where Tom hopes to find two young girls who have been missing. Arming himself beforehand, he then crashes into the hideout. Shooting at the group of gangsters he finds, he puts an end to them and proceeds to alter the scene to arm the corpses which were previously unarmed. Like he expected to, he then finds the two girls he was there for and rescues them. Later, Captain Jack Wander appreciates Tom's plan and his efforts, leading to the successful rescue. Smelling the alcohol on him, though, he offers to get him to the hospital before anyone else discovers him. Outside, however, Tom's former partner, Terrence Washington, confronts him about his discriminatory ways of approaching suspects and even warns him about facing severe consequences from the Korean community for not giving the suspects an opportunity for a trial. Pulling Tom away from Terrence, Captain Wander strictly instructs him to stay away from him. At the hospital later, Tom meets Captain James Biggs of Internal Affairs, who offers his help if he ever needs it. During his interrogation regarding the case, Tom paints a story depicting that he only returned the fire of the gangsters at the hideout. Arriving at a party later, Tom learns about Captain Wander's promotion. Believing that Tom cracking the Korean gangster case is what gave him the edge, Wander thanks Tom, since usually the head of Internal Affairs gets to be the first commander. Hearing that Wander has history with James Biggs, Tom wonders why he would be interested in him. Discussion among the unit then leads to the conclusion that Terrence must have snitched about Tom to James during the several meetings he has had with him recently. Seeing Tom's anger, Wander stops him from confronting Terrence to avoid him getting into an even bigger mess. Continuing to believe that Terrence must have reported him to James, Tom follows Terrence to the convenience store one day. Noticing a couple of gangsters on their way to the store, however, Tom approaches Terrence to work together. Misunderstanding his intentions, Terrence attacks him and mentions having dirt on both Tom as well as Wander. The gangsters step into the store just then and carelessly open fire. Staying hidden, Tom returns their attack but accidentally shoots Terrence on his back. Coming across Terrence soon enough, the gangsters repeatedly shoot him to his end. Looking through the surveillance footage with Wander and the team later, Tom continues to maintain that it was a robbery that went wrong. However, with Tom's tiff with Terrence earlier and his accidental shot, Wander brings to his attention how the entire situation can be seen alternately. He says that someone like James Biggs will easily conclude that Tom hired thugs to get rid of Terrence because of his reports against him. Reiterating that Tom is one of the best on his team, Wander offers to turn his back to allow Tom to remove the surveillance footage, thereby preventing it from being submitted into evidence and incriminating him. He also suggests that they can spin the story in such a way that Tom was unable to save Terrence despite being the first to arrive on the scene. Later that evening, Tom meets Grace, his partner, who urges him to honor his friendship with Terrence despite its rocky end. The next day, Tom is temporarily reassigned to conducting preliminary interviews for complaints against cops till Terrence's case is done with. This is where James Biggs finds him and invites him for lunch together. Curious about Terrence's end and furious that the culprits simply walked away, James questions Tom about his involvement in the matter in addition to inquiring about the missing security footage. When he does not get any satisfactory answers, however, James warns Tom about coming after him and Wander. Later, an angry Wander storms into James's office with Tom, ensuring that he knows they won't be giving up without a fight. After Terrence's funeral, Tom attempts to speak to his widow Linda and mentions that he was the first on the scene. However, she turns him away, implying her unwillingness to hear him out. Back at the station, Tom finds Detective Paul Discant, who is working on Terrence's case. He is turned away here as well, with Paul not interested in sharing the case's details with him. Heading over to the coroner's office then, Tom discovers that Terrence was shot 18 times. While most of the bullets belonged to the gangsters at the store, there was one that belonged to Tom. Paul gets there just then and asks for the ballistic evidence. On his way out, Paul reveals that he's on the same side as Tom and states his version of the scene, making sure it doesn't incriminate Tom. Despite Tom's anger, Paul insists that letting the culprits free is the only way to ensure that Tom's name is not involved in the case. Just then, he receives information that the DNA found at the store belongs to Fremont and Coates. Armed with this information, Tom finds more details about the culprits from Detectives Santos and DeMille, who had arrested them during another case earlier. Ironically, Tom learns that while the culprits deserved to be punished for their deeds, Terrence interfered for their rights, leading to their freedom, which eventually brought about his end. While Tom is confident about being able to nab the culprits again, Sergeant Mike Clady asks him to forget about it if he wishes to keep his job. Seeking Wander later that night, Tom goes over to his house to ask for his permission to end Terrence's culprits. Observing his inebriated state though, Wander urges him to understand the seriousness of James Biggs looking into them and suggests him to stay away from the case. At work the next day, Paul informs Tom that Terrence was a corrupt cop. When Tom suspects Paul of switching teams and working for James, an angry Paul tries walking away. Seeing his disappointment, Tom realizes his error in judgment and convinces Paul to tell him the rest of his findings. Paul then reveals that Terrence apparently was involved with a narcotics ring and was found in the store with a lot of cash as well. Concluding that this could have been Terrence's business arrangement, Paul and Tom decide to deal with things on their own. Their investigation leads them to the culprit's neighborhood. Seeing cops there, one of the guys takes off and Paul chases him. Following them by car, Tom finally catches up to the guy and finds out about someone named Grill who would be able to tell them about Fremont and Coates. Confronting Grill later, they eventually take him in for whatever information he can give them. The next morning, Tom meets Linda and insists on talking to her. When he mentions Terrence's possible corruption, she tells him that he had the cash because they plan to leave for the Bahamas intending to start afresh. Back at work, Sergeant Clady hands over Tom the bullet he had fired at Terrence, implying that his name would not come up in Terrence's case. Grill calls him from prison just then to inform him that he should look for a guy called Scribble, as he would have the information he seeks. Nabbing Scribble a while later, Tom and Paul are eventually led to a house in the hills where they discover the corpses of the real Fremont and Coates. Quite clear that they passed long before Terrence, it is now obvious that his culprits roam around with stolen identities on top of all their other crimes. Meeting up with Scribble again, Tom asks him to set up a meeting with the culprits when they contact him next so that he and Paul can take over whatever job Terrence was doing for them. At a police get-together later that evening, Grace joins Tom with the others while everyone joyfully regales her with stories about how strict Tom is as a cop. Paul calls him the next morning with news about Scribble having secured a meeting that night with the criminals posing as Fremont and Coates. Before getting to the meeting, Tom heads over to meet Linda yet again. Giving her the security footage of the store this time, he tells her that he understands her pain. He explains that his wife was with another man when a blood clot in her brain burst. As it turns out, she was taken to the hospital but was on her own when she passed on the hospital's sidewalk. Stating that not knowing the truth is a pain he is living with, he informs Linda that Terrence was not on his own during his last moments, and also assures her of his intention to avenge his unfair end. While Linda accepts the security footage from Tom, she also tells him about her disinterest in revenge of any kind since it won't bring Terrence back. Preparing for the meeting later, Tom asks Paul to head home to keep him away from trouble. However, an adamant Paul insists on accompanying Tom regardless of the consequences of the meeting. They run into James Biggs on their way out, who again warns about taking action against Tom. He simply replies that even if he is hated, the department still needs him to clean the messy stuff that goes beyond the law. On their way later, Tom gets Paul to switch out the ammunition in their weapons to avoid the incident being traced back to them. Meeting up with Scribble then, the two are given a last chance to back out of the trouble that the gangsters are capable of stirring up, but a determined Tom decides to go ahead with their plan. Finally meeting the fake Fremont and Coates, Tom gains their trust by offering to assist in the smooth operation of their business. However, they soon recognize him as the person at the store with Terrence. Matters escalate when Paul suddenly mentions knowing the guys, possibly from an earlier case. But before he can elaborate, he is shot in his neck. While Tom hides, Scribble is shot as well, and when he refuses to attack Tom, he is shot to his end. With the entire situation now left to Tom, he carefully seeks them out before they attempt to flee and takes the fake Fremont and Coates down. He goes back to Paul then, who soon breathes his last with Tom by his side in his final moments. Immediately going over to Grace's place then, Tom catches the news reports to learn that the fake Fremont and Coates were actually undercover deputy sheriffs. Identified as the only cop-killer suspect, Tom wonders who could be behind everything being on the news already. While a scared Grace stops Tom from leaving, he insists that she needs to stay away from him. Just then, Detectives Santos and DeMille get there to arrest him. Tom soon realizes, however, that the trouble has just started for him when he learns that Santos and DeMille have been watching him for a while and know about the store's security footage with Linda. They also tell him about having ended the real Fremont and Coates in addition to planting their DNA at the store. Even more shockingly, Tom deduces that Terrence was never involved with narcotics dealings, but that it has always been Wander instead. This also leads to the conclusion that Terrence had known about Wander and was reporting him to James Biggs. Discreetly uncuffing himself, Tom learns that Santos and DeMille intend to end him and blame him for Linda's end by planting his DNA there. When DeMille begins to badmouth Grace, Tom attacks him with the cuff before they eventually crash and Santos knocks him out. When he wakes up a while later, he realizes that he has been brought to the house in the hills where he found the corpses of Fremont and Coates previously. Crawling away toward where they are buried, Tom is made fun of by Santos and DeMille, who do not recognize that he has a plan. Grabbing his opportunity then, Tom attacks DeMille with a shovel and then uses his gun to take Santos down as well. Clady is at Linda's house meanwhile, forcing her to give him the security footage she got from Tom. Fortunately, Tom gets there just in time to tackle Clady, thereby saving Linda's life. Cuffing Clady, Tom asks Linda to go somewhere far away. Depositing Clady in the car's trunk, Tom then meets Wander and asks for his help. Eager to keep his truth covered, Wander offers an alibi for Tom like he always does, and plans to blame Santos and DeMille for the ends of the two deputies. When Tom asks him to get Clady there for support, Wander agrees to that as well. However, little does he know that Tom has Clady's phone. Reading the message sent to Claddy, Tom sees that Wander instructed Claddy to end him. Finally realizing that Tom knows everything, Wander still tries to tell him how special and important he is to him, unlike the rest of their unit. In return, Tom fights Wander, not just for Terrence's unfair end, but for Paul as well. A man with everything to lose, Wander strongly fights back until Tom eventually cuffs him. As a last resort then, Wander offers Tom a bribe, all the money hidden in his wall, in addition to revealing that he knows secrets and has incriminating evidence against plenty of high-ranking officials including their chief. It is because of that, he says, that he has been able to safeguard Tom and his activities that go beyond the law. Wander also adds that plans to use these secrets to be the chief someday, and eventually maybe even the mayor. Refusing to agree with Wander's belief regarding his method of cops helping cops, however, Tom shoots him to his end. When James Biggs gets there a while later, he reveals that everything had been a plan to take Wander down. To keep several secrets safe, James had to deal with Wander, and there couldn't have been anybody better than Tom to bring him down, which is why he was shown the corruption prevailing in his unit. Appreciating Tom's efforts, James mentions that he agrees with the department's need for him.